So as introduced, I'm an industrial design engineer, and I now teach sustainability in Campus Kortrijk at the University of Ghent. I'm going to explain to you something that I call open-ended design, which is also can be defined as precarious by design, and really builds upon the work of Lieven, just introduced. So when I was studying, my professors were asking me to design perfect products, stable products. Already back then, I had some doubts about this vision, so I decided to do a very small experiment. I picked 5 vases, and I used them for a year, just normal use. I planted some small flowers in them. The flowers grew, died. Eventually, after a year, these were the vases. So we expect from plants to be living and dynamic, but we are not used to think about products as dynamic. But as you can see from this picture, they changed a lot. So my question is, why don't we design for the real? So in other words, why don't we design for change? First of all, design is a process, and the very intention of design is to modify reality. So while dealing with this super complex process of designing, we have always one tension between what is ideal in our mind and what is real and happens in the world. So ideal is in fact very abstract and it's under control, while reality, as much as we would like not to be, is out of our control. At that point, I start observing reality around me. Very simple things. For example, my favorite cup fell down and broke, so I couldn't use it anymore. Or these small information boards under my place where I used to live in Milano melted down for a very warm summer that year. So these are bad examples, things that changed and couldn't be used anymore, but there are very nice examples on the other hand. I didn't expect to have so many Italians in the room, but it's a very typical product in Italy. It's called mocha. So something that you might not know is that this product is in fact imperfect. So when you buy it, you don't use it. Or better, you don't drink the coffee because the coffee doesn't taste good. You use it 2-3 times, throwing away the coffee, till this aluminum casted product creates a patina. The patina makes the coffee better. So this is an example of a product that evolves because it's imperfect. Another example. This is Giulietta from Romeo and Julia. It's a statue in Verona. It's in bronze. The material is very similar to the other one. So it is believed that to touch Giulietta brings good luck. I observed tourists there, and I can tell you, no one asked, where should I touch Giulietta? It was very clear. The material is showing it. So in this case, we have a product that, because it's imperfect, because it's growing old, in fact, is delivering information. But these are material changes. That's not only the case. We can also change the meaning. This is something I've seen in Ghent. If you have a user that is clever enough and has a trigger, as Lieven defined it, strong enough, he might put his kayak instead of a bike. And the kayak rack, the bicycle rack is in fact perfect as a kayak rack. So I hope I convinced you enough that products are emergent, in fact. They are constantly interacting with their ecology. So from being ideal, just because we use them and because time passes for everyone, they become ultimate particular, so unique expressions of their context. In other words, products are never fully finished. They are ongoing, emergent, precarious, and open-ended. When I thought about that, I searched around, and the first thing I found that could relate to this is Wabi-Sabi. Some of you might never have heard about that, but somebody defined it as gravity or ego, meaning that it is something that even if you never heard it, you still understand it, and you know it very well. So Wabi-Sabi is the beauty of things that change, of things that are unfinished, imperfect. It's very much related with the Zen Buddhism. and this is a symbol of Wabi-Sabi. This is a symbol of Wabi-Sabi because it's a very humble ball that can show the traces of use. This is very different from what we are used, because the idea here is that our product, from being ideal, becomes real, which means precarious and with imperfections in its very structure. And because of these imperfections, the product changes and becomes more beautiful. Of course, I don't mean here beautiful as an aesthetical quality. Beauty really means the idea of being purposeful, meaningful for someone. When I realized that, I also realized that there's one product that everyone uses every day, and that works in the exact same way, and that's Wikipedia. I didn't know back then, but when I searched more in depth, Wikipedia itself uses a Wabi-Sabi programming system. So they were well aware of about what they were doing. So Wikipedia becomes better just because we use it. At the beginning, it was an empty box, so they took a huge risk. But still, was still very abstract. It was still a software, and as you understood, I deal with material objects and with the material world. So at that point, I start analyzing with this perspective everything that surrounded me, and especially industrial cases. And at that point, I achieved the definition of open-ended design. So open-ended design is a design that is able to change according to the changing context. It is open-ended because it's voluntarily imperfect. So it's a design act that makes the product meaningful, able to change meaningfully. All the cases are summed in this website. I never thought about that before being invited here, but in fact, open-ended design is really a way to, in some ways, sustain precariousness in design. So precariousness, I've checked out the definition, and it's really the state of being uncertain or dependent on change. Of course, this is very bad when this can be avoided, but sometimes it cannot be avoided. So open-ended design tackles that precariousness that is unavoidable and spontaneous. More importantly, open-ended design is a methodology that helps us seeing from the products that go from ideal to real, and checking them, let's say, checking them under 10 questions that I call 10 lenses. So it's really a tool that I suggest to designers, to my students, especially to just observe reality, observe change, and try to anticipate it by a design act. I say anticipated it because open-ended design is not a solution. It's really a way to better understand the problem and to understand your hypothesis. Okay. At this point, I would like you to give you some examples to make it more practical. This comes from Chile. What I've noticed is that after big disasters, for example, earthquakes, houses were given, containers were given to citizens. These containers that still costed very much also for the government were left behind soon. So what this design studio thought is, I will just give half of a house. So this is rather imperfect house, unfinished, because their idea is, we might think that these people don't want to change anymore because already everything changed, but yet they might need change to become closer to themselves. So in this case, the citizens, the inhabitants of these houses are invited to reappropriate the house. Here you can see some examples. And the reappropriation is unimaginable from the designers. So that's the out-of-control instance. We don't know if the user would like to have a garage or a porch or a terrace. It's up to the user to decide, according to his or her own needs. So this is an example of open-ended design by unfinished products. Another example is an Italian designer, Paolo Julian. The product is rather trivial, is a vase, is a centerpiece, but I think it's a very nice metaphor for fragility, because this material is terracotta, is very fragile. So the centerpiece is this big, and many designers might think, okay, in case of, if it falls, it breaks. That's the property, that's the nature of the material. So some of us might think, I try to protect it, or I will not use it because I care it too much. But things are made to be used. That's what makes them beautiful. So what he decided to do is to put an imperfection. So what you see here, the decoration, is in fact, mechanically speaking, the place where the rupture will start, as it happens in chocolate bars. So in case of fall, we still have a second life of the product. So these small balls are in fact this big, and you can use them. This doesn't mean that he wants us to drop it on the floor after 2 minutes. That's also rather pricey. But it's what if? We are not trained to design and think in that way. What if unexpected things happen? So this is open-ended design by designing a second life. Another example. This is more on the assistive technology. I've done some works around assistive technology, 3D printed. I put it online, but what I realized is that even though it was spread, it was not enough to be open-ended. So when I checked the reappropriation of my products, in fact, they were remaining the same. And I cannot believe that, because every context is different. In this case, enabling the future, they really done it well, because they really worked in following up all the reappropriations and checking all the parameters and really helping the user to reappropriate the product. So in this sense, each hand is different and is really changing. So this is, here you can see an example of all the measurement that you have to take. So this is an open-ended design that helps people in the reappropriation process. Another example, Liven mentioned it before, is Sugru. That's, of course, as you can see, I'm really giving an overview on all the possibilities of open-ended design. So in this case, the young designer thought about a shapeless product, just to fix things. So also here, the whole responsibility is up to the user. The user can decide how to use the material and what to fix. And of course, there are very genius solutions that were, again, not possible to imagine from the designer point of view. So this is an open-ended design by repairing and or hacking solutions. So really enabling others to take action. Another product that I'm really fond of lately is in fact a material. This is a growing material. It's called mycelium. It's the vegetative parts of the mushroom. So it's everywhere in the earth. And when it grows, it creates a net that is solid enough to create an actual structure. So this is an example of product. So it's a real living product, so open-ended per definition. And the product, the nice part for me is, on the one hand, we cannot control the process. So it's out of control, open-ended production process. And on top of that, the product is meant to completely vanish at the end, being fully biodegradable. So that's also a possibility. I just give briefly the last two examples. So in this case, that's a very good example with relation with the projects of Design for Everyone. So this pair of glasses are in fact changeable and adaptable thanks to a small pump that is on the side and that pushes this liquid inside the lenses. So depending on your problem, you can fix them.
Wow.
This is a standard product, in fact, so it's an industrial product, or could be an industrial product, that still helps and embraces the variety of users. So this is really the step that Liven was speaking at the end.
Wow.
So by adjusting them, every user can have the feeling if it's right or wrong. Of course, industry nowadays is not willing to take such risks. But in this way, people who couldn't afford glasses can have them. So of course, it's really a balance that has to be found there. Open-ended design in this case is obtained by highly adaptive products design. Last case, here you see a table. Top is a marble from Carrara, typical material. And here you see another product, is a cutting board with a hook to hang it at the wall. What you might not see at first sight is that this cutting board is in fact the perfect scrap of production of the other product. And this small hook is in fact the technology of the head of the machine that goes around and makes the hook not to ruin the external part, which is the sink. So in this case, open-ended design is simple as it is about changing the name. This is called waste, but it's not waste at all. And the designer must be creative and just search in what others have discarded. So these are just some examples, but really options are infinite. I've been teaching this for years now. These are all the projects done by my students. The main part that we did was really to take the cases of the, Design for Everyone and trying to upscale them to the market. I'm not presenting them now, but I'm very happy to have a discussion later on during the break. What I want to say is that teaching open-ended design and approaching open-ended design means to have a methodology, but especially to change the mindset. So you have to be able to observe change, not to avoid it, because sometimes it's painful, to anticipate it with imperfection, and more importantly, to be able to lose control on your design outcomes. So to let things happen, but still remain engaged to observe them. So it's a very iterative process. System thinking and sustainability are fundamental skills for this mindset. In other words, we were wondering, or we might wonder, how much the material world influences us, but we can also wonder how much we do influence the material world. But these two questions are still very linear. The two things are bonded in a circular way. They reinforce or balance each other. And it's not only a singular conversation, but it's a societal conversation that we're having here. So to go back to my first question, I really hope, as Victor Papanek also hopes in his books, that we stop searching and designing for the truth and for the ideal, but we really start tackling the real world. Thank you.